All right, everybody, welcome back. We are diving deep today.
Into DOGE.
That's right, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Elon Musk's
brainchild. We want to figure out, are they really saving us money as much as they claim? And are these cuts justified? We've got some awesome economists here to help us unpack this. From American University and George Mason.
A lot of interesting perspectives to consider.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. One of the things that really jumps out is the difference between what DOGE says they're saving and what we can actually see in the numbers. Hundreds of billions, trillions even.
Yeah, they've thrown around some really big numbers, haven't they?
Big numbers.
It's definitely eye-catching.
So what's the reality check? What are the economists saying?
Well, the economists we talked to, they put the actual verifiable cuts much lower, closer to $6 billion.
$6 billion.
Which, compared to $1 trillion.
That's a big difference.
A tiny fraction, right? And a big chunk of that $6 billion comes from what they call capping overhead payments for research grants.
Overheads. See, I feel like that's one of those things that could easily just slip under the radar. But these are probably pretty important.
Absolutely, yeah. Overheads are basically the indirect costs of doing research. So it's not the research itself, but it's the stuff around it, the administrative staff, keeping the labs running, making sure everything's complying with regulations, all that kind of behind-the-scenes stuff.
So DOGE is saying those costs are too high.
Basically, yeah, their argument is that these overheads are inflated, and by tapping them, they can save a good chunk of money.
But is that good long-term strategy to cut research funding?
That's a huge question, right? I mean, think about it. If you start cutting funding to research hospitals, to universities, to important agricultural programs, it could really stifle innovation, hurt us in the long run. We might save a little bit now, but potentially lose out on major advancements down the line.
Yeah, it's like you're skimping on fertilizer to save a few bucks today, but next season your crops are going to be like withered and sad.
You're sacrificing the future for some short-term gains.
So this whole thing, it makes you wonder, is DOGE really going after fraud like they claim to be doing?
Right.
Or are they just cutting stuff that they personally think is wasteful?
Well, and that's where the economists highlight this really important distinction, right? There's a lot of confusion, even within DOGE, it seems, about what is fraud and what is waste.
Yeah, what is that line?
Right, because fraud implies intentional deception, somebody's trying to cheat the system. Waste, on the other hand, that's much more subjective. What one person might see as a complete waste, another person could see as a really crucial investment.
So can you give us like a real-world example of how that might play out?
Sure. Think about DEI grants, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. DOGE has labeled a lot of these grants as wasteful spending, but other folks see them as absolutely essential for creating a fairer, more equitable society.
Right, so it just depends on your perspective.
Exactly, and that really highlights how slippery that term waste can be.
Okay, so if DOGE is really serious about going after fraud, shouldn't they be a lot more specific? How do they even know where to cut if waste is this subjective thing?
That's a great point. The economists we spoke to, they really emphasize the need for transparency and due process. DOGE can't just broadly label something wasteful and make these sweeping cuts.
Yeah, kind of seems like they are, though.
Right, but they need to clearly identify instances of actual fraud, provide solid evidence, and really justify their actions.
But then doesn't that bring us to the whole issue of untagged government payment?
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Where we don't even necessarily know where the money's going in the first place.
It makes it really hard.
If we can't even track spending effectively, how can we have an informed conversation about what's wasteful or fraudulent?
Right. You've hit on a crucial point. That lack of transparency makes it super difficult to assess whether what DOGE is doing is legitimate or not. So there's a real need, and the economists really stress this, for better tracking, better accountability when it comes to government spending.
So where does that leave us? DOGE wants to reduce spending, which in theory sounds great, but the actual savings are way less than what they're saying.
Way less.
And there's a lot of concern about, how they're deciding what to cut and whether those cuts are really justified.
Exactly. And it raises a really important question for all of us. Is the government doing enough to prevent actual fraud and to track spending effectively? Because the implications of what DOGE is doing, the potential consequences of these cuts, are something that we all need to think about really carefully.
Yeah, a lot to ponder.
Definitely.
That's it for our deep dive on DOGE, but this is a conversation that needs to keep going. So think about how this might affect things in your own community, your local research institutions. Or what about the future of innovation in fields like medicine or technology? Keep those questions in mind and keep exploring. Until next time.
See ya.